My name is Roy Tyerman. My home has always been in the Consett District, and I'm 89 years old. In 1950, I moved from a small school in September into the sixth form at the Royal Grammar School, Newcastle. My only worry was that I couldn't play football. The compulsory game there was rugby. Once I started to play rugby, I loved it. Derek Wilkinson, who was a friend of mine, persuaded me to join the Consett Club in the spring of 1951. So I've been in the club now for 71 years. And during that time I served the club in various roles. First 15 captain, second 15 captain, third 15 captain, team secretary, chairman and president. I also taught at Consett Grammar School, and in 1964 I was able to introduce rugby into the school. I also formed the first Colts teams at Consett. This was a great pleasure because I always liked working with young people. When I first joined the club in the 50s, it was pretty chaotic. They were very nomadic. They didn't have a field or a clubhouse. The headquarters moved from one pub to the other, from the Burton Hotel to the Imperial Hotel to the Victoria at Black Hill. At first there was no training. We changed in the hut of the Consett YMCA on Sherburn Terrace, which was an old army hut from the First World War, and we changed in the hall with both the visitors and our team and the referee. The playing field at that time was at Dell's Lane. There were two particularly memorable players at that time who were veterans, but were playing for the first or the second team. Martin Huntley was the first of these. He was a miner from Ledgate. He was very tall, had very big shoulders and the largest hands I've ever seen. He could pick up a rugby ball like you and I pick up an apple. He was a strong man. He didn't throw his weight around though, but if anyone started anything, Martin would finish it. He looked after us young players when we went out with the team. During that time there was one memorable incident when we had to play Northern's first team because they had a cup tie against Percy Park the following Saturday and wanted the practice, so we replaced their second 15. Usually we were well beaten by their second 15 actually, but on that day we held them to less than 20 points, which was very good. And afterwards, in the YMCA hut, I happened to be sitting next to the referee, who was the secretary of Consett Club, but he was a first-class referee, and he was very well respected in the whole of North East England. At that while I was sitting there, George Gibb, who was an ex-international 2 or 3 years before and playing prop for Northern, came over to Alan and said, "Swinny, what were you doing this afternoon?" And Alan said, "I just thought I'd let the pair of you get on me." What had happened, he was noted after an early scrum for thumping his opposite prop. Well, he thumped Martin Huntley, and he lifted his shirt and showed Martin a midriff that was every colour from pink, red, blue and purple. Obviously Martin had been singing his fists in the hidden midriff all afternoon. The other person involved was Jack Ross, who was a school teacher at Ledgate and all-round sportsman. He played cricket for Ledgate, was a great hero with his fast bowling and big hitting. The children at the school all loved him and the parents respected him. On a rugby field, he was a demon at times because he had a little bit of a temper in him. But he was a superb player who played second row for the county before the war. Jack again was a bit of an enforcer for the team on the field and also again looked after the young people and gave us lots of advice. At that time, there was no training in the club, not having a field or a clubhouse. So we were a bit chaotic. We never knew who was going to be playing with you exactly the following Saturday. Cards were sent out informing we were on the first team or the second team, and we travelled by bus to away games. As a reason for this, the teams were not very well organised and we often got beaten. This went on until we eventually, in the mid-50s, got the lease of the new pitch which the council created at Bellevue, which is still our pitch today. A hut was followed later. That was brought with donations from players and committee members. Once we got that, we were able to start training properly, although it wasn't official then, it didn't have to train. But some of the younger ones on the side were sick of getting beaten and we started to train, and things improved. I went into the army from a national service in 1956, and for those 2 years I only played at Consett when I was home on leave. When I came out in 58, it was noticeable that new players had been recruited who were very keen, and there was an enthusiasm to make progress. A year after that, I became captain in 59, which was a good time to start because there was a momentum in the club to move forward. Also, Consett Iron Company was thriving at the time, and new people were coming in to appointments in different departments, and they also started a graduate training scheme which brought university players in to train with the company. As a result of that, we had an influx of trained rugby players coming to the club because no school at that time played in the area. This made us a much stronger team, and we went forward to have considerable success in the 1960s. During that time, we had our best runs in the County Cup. In 1962-63, we played Billingham, who were an ICI supporter team and very strong on Teesside, in the first round, and drew Struwell away. The following Saturday, we beat them 8-3 at Consett. We went on after that to play a match against Hartlepool on the 29th of December. Unfortunately, that was the next round and was cancelled because of all the snow. It was the start of a big freeze, and that match never got played for another 12 weeks. It was played on the 9th of March at Hartlepool on the coast. Consett then was still covered in snow and ice. Following week we couldn't replay them because the Consett pitch was still frozen. The next week we played them and we won 3-0, but the pitch was an absolute quagmire from all the melting snow. As a result of that, we were in the semi-final of the Durham County Cup for the first time. We're not in our best form because the snow had disrupted us training, we'd lost our momentum a little bit, and Durham City were a crack side. The England standoff, Mike Weston was their star player, and he had the longest kick in the country. The hooker Stan Hodgson supplied them with a ready ball. He was the English hooker as well, and they had some other star players playing for the county in their team. They hammered us 61-3. Unfortunately, one of our best players, John Kelman, was fettled by one of their props in the first half and was taken to hospital. Other two players had accidents, so we finished up with a depleted team because there were no replacements, and we were carrying 2 passengers and were a man short. That was a lesson which we learned from. The next season in the County Cup, we played Hartlepool all boys away again. We went down there and we beat them 9-6. That was a running encouraging result because at that time they had quite a strong team. In the next round, which was the quarter-final, we had to play Durham City again, but this time at home. And we'd had a good run in the fixtures we'd had previously to that. In the first half, we really got stuck into them, and we went ahead in that half 8-0. They've got 2 penalties, which made it 8-6. We still pressed hard and defended hard, but they were getting a lot of the ball from Hodgson, and Weston was kept kicking us back into our own 25. This obviously tired us out, and in the last 10 minutes, where we were still leading 8-6, they suddenly scored 2 tries. Mickey Weston engineered them both. The first with a very clever move where he did a long reverse pass to Len Roll coming in at speed, and he cut 3 through us to score. That followed again. We went up to their end, he booted us back, and this happened 2 or 3 times because we were trying to win then because they were leading 11-6. He did the same thing again, really, kicked us back down 25. One of our players knocked on, they had a scrum, Hodgson got the ball, Mike Weston did a clever scissors and they scored again. And at the end, just before the end, they added another penalty to beat us by 19 points to 8. But the team had really advanced from the defeat of 61-3 the previous season. And Mike Weston was very gracious after the game when we were having our food and drink, when he spoke in a little speech, and he said, well, the next time you play us, you should beat us the progress you made in the last year. As a result of this success, we had improve fixture lists, because it weren't leagues in those days and you arranged your own fixtures. And we got fixtures with the fashionable clubs. In that time, we played some excellent clubs who were much stronger than we were. I remember in November '63 we played Bloden away, and Bloden at that time was improving no end, and it just reached the final of the County Cup for the first time since the pre-war days. They always had strong forwards, but they'd also got a lot of keen backs playing for them. We went down there. At the beginning we started very well, and we were leading 5-0. Then disaster struck after 7 minutes when our hooker was fettled by a notorious prop of theirs and taken off. Worse was to follow a few minutes later when our star wing forward John Marks, who was a very keen tackler, a Welsh lad, and was a great player for us, and he injured his shoulder, and I asked him to go off, but he wouldn't. He said, "I'll stop on the wing, Roy, and get in the way." And he did that because he had very quick feet. As the game went on, just on half-time, Cam Farrell, the fast winger from them, broke away and scored a try in the corner. Eventually, we held out until the last 10 minutes, although we were much depleted side against a very strong pack. But unfortunately, Cam Farrell himself then engineered a very clever move where he created space and shot down the wing from his 25 to ours and scored again. Brian defeated in the last minute, but just 6-5. It's quite a memorable day for us as well. Following that, we had fixtures with West Hartlepool and had a good affinity with them, because every time we went to Hartlepool in those days, whichever team we were playing, after we'd had the game and refreshments and spoken to the team we were playing in the bar, we used to go to the West Clubhouse, because they didn't have a clubhouse in a field of their own. They had this solitary house sticking up on the edge of the industrial area, and that was their clubhouse. Opposite was a car park, and nearby was the Greyhound Stadium in West Hartlepool, and that's where they played their fixtures. We went there, we enjoyed their company, we had great fun, and after we left there we went to the town hall dance before we came home. So that was a regular thing. But with the fixtures we had with them, we were a very strong team again at the time, who were now rivaling the premier team in Hartlepool in those days, which was Hartlepool Rovers. They had county players playing for them, and had 2 players who eventually played for England. We had a series of games away with them in particular where we did very well. In '59, we just lost 14-17. In '60, we just lost 5-3. In the following year, '61, which was the most memorable game I remember for Consett, we defeated them by 11 points to 5 at Hartlepool. That was quite a feat. It was a day where we planned what our strategies were, and everybody stuck to the plan, and we managed to beat them. So it was a real success for us. As a result of that, we got even more fixtures with good clubs. And in those days, we used to travel at Easter to play in Cockermouth in Cumberland. And at that time, they were, again, a very strong team in Cumberland. And in 1965, we went over there on Good Friday to play them, and we had a depleted team. We had a wing forward from the second team playing full-back, who was a great defender, but he couldn't kick. And we knew whenever John caught the ball, he would just run with it till he was stopped. At least we knew what was going to happen. But we had an element of rugby league in them, you see, because in Cumberland there's a lot of rugby league, both professional and minor rugby league. They play with rugby league tactics, some of them not very clear. The referees also over there were different in their interpretation of the laws to the referees in the northeast. We also had 2 young half-backs playing for us that had been playing for Durham School, Peter Cavey at standoff and Tony Barr at scrum half. And they were started dishing out the dirty stuff. They stamped on the back of my hand when the bottom of the ruck, for example, and they said about our young half-backs. That got our anger up, and we controlled that and put it into our game. There was still a low score when we were well into the second half, and there's a very strange incident happened. One of our defenders cleared from the left-hand side of our 25, and the ball went right down towards their 25 on the right wing. Our right winger, David Bardo, was flashing after it like lightning, and our full-back was careening back at similar speed to get to the ball first. A dog ran onto the pitch and struck the ball and then ran off again. The pair of them arrived at the ball at the same time. They hadn't slowed down. He dived on the burn to stop it. David Hamacha got his foot to it and it went through onto the edge of the goal line, and David followed up, tapped it over and thumbed the ball. And we beat them 5-0, and they were unbeaten through all that season until that match. It was an unexpected victory for us. Following that, the club was really making progress. At the time, the two star players we had were the two wing forwards. John Maggs, who came from Tredegar in Wales. He was very skillful. He had a tackle that cut people in half, rather like the All Blacks do. And he was very skillful as well. The other one, John Kelman, came from Tomontoul, the highest village in Scotland. He came on a company graduate scheme from Aberdeen University. He was also an exceptional wing forward, and he didn't tackle as hard as John, but nobody ever got past him. He was a great forager for the ball, and once he had the ball, he was very elusive. In fact, it was very difficult for us to support him because you never knew which way John was going to go. They stayed with the club, although they're the best two wing forwards in the county, but the county never picked them because Consett weren't a fashionable club. John was picked for a county trial at North Durham early in the season, and several of us went down to watch the match. He was playing for the Possibles against the Probables, who were the previous year's County 15. The Possible beat the Probable team comfortably, and John scored, I think, 3 tries, if I remember rightly, in that game, still not picked by the county. Any halfbacks of the clubs we played against always said that the toughest afternoons they had were when they played against Maggs and Kelman for Consett. Despite that, we heard that the county selectors had said he didn't pass the ball, which was a ridiculous comment. 1 try scored, he virtually ran through the whole of their side. My happiest memories with the club really came from the social side, because when you join the rugby club, there's always a social circle you're into. At first, of course, in the first few years, it was always the men's song and beer, and there wasn't much of ladies apart from occasion socials and dances. But it was a very napped thing, and when people moved away, they went to join a club, and immediately they had a social circle to go into. The Tups were formed. This was a veterans team, and that created another social circle with a great social life where the wives and partners took part in the social activities to raise money and the various dinners which they held. There was a lot of comic events went on to entertain at the dinners, and when you went, whether it was the male or female who was there, you knew at some stage of one of these events you would be teased and made fun of, but everyone took it in great fun. In those days we used to play Tynedale on New Year's Day. It was a bit ridiculous after all the New Year's celebrations. In 1960, when we went over there, we played in the longest match Consett ever played. We're doing well, and the Heroes had a very strong team. A lot of farmers, and in their fixtures they played against some of the Scottish border teams. They usually beat us, but we often gave them a close game. In that game, unfortunately, they scored what was described in their paper as an easy try early in the game. In actual fact, their scrum half, Kettle Thompson, was miles offside when the ball went loose. He just picked it over and dropped over the line with it. The referee seemed not to see that. Battled on in the second half. It went on and on. We got tireder and tireder. And when there was noises from the little small stand that they had, people shouting at the referee, he kept looking at his watch and carried on. Eventually, we struggled off exceptionally tired, only to find that we'd played an extra 20 minutes in the second half. The spectators thought it was very amusing because it looked as though we were playing by memory and in slow motion. We didn't realise that. We thought we were still trying as hard as we could go. Fancy playing an hour for the second half in rugby. Still, after the match, nobody suffered anything, and after food and a couple of pints in the tiny clubhouse, everything was all right. The other funny memory going when I got concussion. I'd been knocked on the head, came off the field, dose of smelling salts under your nose, and you went back on again in those days. Eventually, when I got in the baths after the match, I suddenly sort of came to, but I couldn't remember anything about the game. And the report in the local paper was headed, "Roy scores twice in the game that never was." And everyone said to me, "Well, we'll have to kick in the head each week before so we can get some more tries, you know." So that was, quite a daft situation, really. My biggest skill these days is seeing how the club has changed from what it was 71 years ago. Now it's thriving with a lovely clubhouse, their own field, and an abundance of young players, mini rugby booming with over 100 kids coming at the weekend and their parents. The courts are well supported, the club is doing well, the standard of play is very good, and when you go there, there's a great welcome. I just hope it will continue in the same vein. It's make further progress, but it's doing very well as it is. I'm very pleased to see this. May go on for a long time.